Once again, Rye Harbour is a very popular layout at exhibitions, and Martin is very cunning, creating little scenes, little slices of life to create an atmosphere.
If we take this track gang as an example, normally they'd be engaged in repairing the track along here. But because they can't move, we can't run trains round them. My answer was to assume a landslip had occurred on the embankment here. We put a 5-mile-an-hour speed restriction there, and here we have the gang busily engaged in repairing the landslip. Even mistakes can be turned to one's advantage. Here, I spilt a drop of paint when putting the boat shed in. Rather than try and wipe it out, I extended the paint so that it looked as if oil was leaking from the barrel.
Well, Frank Dyer's Borchester Market is an extensive 4mm scale layout running on 16.5mm gauge. It's based on British Rail Eastern Region practice in the late 50s. And every inch of the 10 by 13 foot layout is packed with interest. Frank is an inveterate showman, and he likes nothing better than to go to exhibitions. And there he makes sure that Borchester Market is run exactly as the prototype.
Now, this is an entirely imaginary place, but it's set in a real enough location, some 10 miles to the northwest of Newark, rather on the edge of the Dukeries country. It's not on a main line, it's on a line which, in fact, nearly did get built in reality in the 1880s. And, of course, its reason for its existence was coal. The railway itself represents, of course, part of the line. You can't represent a complete railway because a railway is a thing very much of length. So I represent the terminus station of this town, Borchester, and a little bit of the line disappearing through tunnels in the hills. If you were standing beside a railway line watching the trains, that is what you would see. You'd see a little bit of railway line, perhaps a quarter of a mile in either direction. That's all you'd see. The trains come into it from somewhere and they disappear to somewhere. This is what I try to show, the train watching scene. But as regards the actual movement of the trains, the way they run, how a railway operates, we try to reproduce this as accurately as we know how. On a real railway, especially at a busy station, a watcher would notice that a lot of things can happen at the same time. And very often you get many completely independent movements taking place on different lines, interweaving of movements very often. For this reason, we work to a pretty complicated schedule. And we have 3 operators that work on the station here, and we can make at least 3 movements at any one time. This is not easy. There's very little automatic. It's nearly all done with manual controls, requiring great concentration on the part of the operators. This is deliberate because when you have to concentrate on doing a job properly like this, this is when you achieve the maximum of fun and interest out of it. Now, there's a lot more in running one train than just a single movement. In fact, it is a complete story. Let's imagine, for instance, that we had an express train running from Borchester Market to London. And so, at the appropriate moment, a little engine, which normally spends its life fussing around the stations, pushing coaches here and vans there, brings into the platform a long rake of coaches. Once in the platform, the little engine uncouples. Meanwhile, in the locomotive yard, the engine which is going to take this train to London is being prepared. And at a few minutes before departure time, this locomotive backs onto the train, and attention now focuses on the signal box, which controls all the movements. And before this train can move out, he has got to get permission for it to do so. He's got to make sure that the line is clear. So he communicates to the next signal box up the line. In this case, it's called Wellow East Junction, ringing a special prepared code of bells. The man at Wellow junction replies back. And what in fact is happening is that the signalman is asking, is the line clear for me to send an express passenger train to Wellow East Junction? First of all, you see the signals across the throat of the station lift, that is, they clear, which means to say the train may proceed. And as the train gathers speed, the signalman signals to the box that the train is on its way. So the departure of one train is quite a story. When you imagine a lot of complicated moves taking place all together at the same time, then you realise that model railwaying is not only an art, but it's quite a science as well.
So far, we've seen 4 mil scale layouts running on track gauges of 16.5 and 18.2 millimeters. But now, let's have a look at Dave Lowry's layout. That runs on a prototypical scale track of 18.83 millimeters.
My layout is called Beverley's. It is a small branch line, and it is my interpretation of 1883 modelling. It's my first real attempt at 1883 modelling, and I suppose it's been the result of some 5 years' work. The period it runs from is from about 1910 to 1915. And when I first joined the club, the Amateur Model Railway Society, many years ago, the chairman there was an expert on London North Western coaching, and I felt this was an area perhaps I could have a go at to create my own thing. So I chose the London North Western. There's no strict prototype for this layout. It basically started off as a test track, which became scenified after a little while. There are many aspects on the layout which I think would very rarely be found in a prototype of this size. So it's basically, it's all fictitious. Most of the scenery has a polystyrene base, and once you've laid the track and cut the baseboard to fit it, it's infilled with polystyrene, which is shaped. Polystyrene I'll then paint green to hide the awful white colour, and from this you can start to contour and create your own scenery. Most of the scenery has a flock base with the various grasses glued down, and this gives you a good working surface.
Yes, Dave's quite right, it does look good. And look at the green grass on the occupation crossing, seldom modelled. A rail motor just pulls into the station, and there it is, there's somebody in the station building, and out goes the rail motor, and straight into the Fiddle Yard. Mind you, that's something everyone needs, a Fiddle Yard in a layout, and the smaller the layout, the more important the Fiddle Yard. He's got 3 tracks on a traverser, and so all he has to do is wind the handle until he lines up something that he wants to come out from the Fiddle Yard.
Starting from the traverser end of the layout, you can first of all arrive at the small station. This is only a very small building. In fact, there is quite an absence of buildings on the layout. From the station, you go past a small coaling stage. This is for small locomotives. There was water cranes. There's a small gate which is opened as a train arrives and departs. At the end of the same road, there is a small cattle dock, which is capable of handling 2 cattle wagons, or occasionally has a permanent way wagon at the end. On the opposite side, you have a small siding which handles the coal traffic and also the goods traffic. As we go under the bridge, the stream moves into the small canal basin, and a siding off onto the left there carries some fish, coal, any sort of traffic that side. We then pass through under the next bridge and into the final little halt at the other end.
And finally, in our line-side look at model railways, we visit Brantford and High Peak. It's a magnificent 7mm O-gauge layout. Brantford and High Peak has been developed in 3 stages since 1972. Full-length express and freight trains running at scale speeds are a practical proposition on such a large layout, which after all covers an area of 60 by 30 feet. The locomotives and rolling stock are models of prototypes running in the late 1930s. The large area the layout covers is used to good effect, with magnificent bridges, buildings, signals and scenery. The line is based on an imaginary area in the Midlands. High Peak is situated somewhere near Birmingham and is built in the Great Western style. This breakdown train is just passing through the station as the Great Western parcels train travels in the opposite direction. High Peak is on a high level, whilst down below, provision has been made for running trams. The blending of model scenery into the painted background is very effective, particularly around Langley Halt level crossing. Now how's that for a control panel? From here, the operator has a clear view of the whole layout and completely controls all his train movements. This through coal train is hauled by a Great Western 7200 Class 2A2. And speeding along on the embankment behind is a Pullman car express hauled by a Southern Railway Merchant Navy Blue Star. In the goods yard at Brantford arrives a local freight train. The station area is a mass of detail. The buildings and line-side structures follow the LMS practice. Just look at this. What an atmosphere. I can just feel myself walking, or better say stumbling across that station yard back in the 1930s, amongst all the hustle and bustle of a busy goods depot. Leaving on time, an LMS 440 pulls away with a local passenger train, and in the foreground, the car park full of commuter vehicles. Just look at this, even more detail. The stop me and buy one ice cream man hoping for business, and a bus picking up passengers. As we pass the station master's house, an LNER express hauled by a Class A3 Pacific is coming through. Just look at her, here she is. And in the opposite direction, an LMS Midland compound 440 working a stopping passenger train, resplendent in its maroon livery. Alongside Brantford Station is a large motive power depot where the line's locomotives are shedded and serviced. And through the station comes a mixed goods train pulled by an LMS Class 8F. What a magnificent 7mm scale layout. An inspiration to all of us, whatever scale we model in. Well, that brings us really to the end of our line-side look at model railways. And all that remains for me to say is thank you for coming to join me. And I hope we'll meet again some other time. Meanwhile, goodbye.